Hey guys, thanks for watching the IDC daily videos. Today we're going to look at another book that has been transformative in the life of some of our folks. I got Trevor King, who is one of our pastors at IDC, asked if he would be willing to share about a book that has been helpful, encouraging, challenging for him. And so I just want to give him a little opportunity to share about it, and I'll just ask some questions. So Trevor, thanks for taking the time, man.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So I asked, if any books came to mind when you just think of books that have been helpful and transformative for you, and tell me what came to mind for you. Which one do you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I would say in the past couple of years, one of the books that's been particularly helpful for me is called 12 Ways Your Phone is Changing You by a guy named Tony Reinke. So I read this a couple years ago, and I think since then it's been really in the back of my mind. Been thinking about a whole lot in terms of just how I use my phone, how I use social media, and all sorts of those things. It's been really helpful for me.
Yeah. So Tony Reinke, if I'm not correct, or if I'm not mistaken, works at Desiring God. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay. So he's kind of swimming in those worlds. So he's not just thinking about technology kind of in the abstract, but he's coming specifically from the posture of Christian worldview and thinking about it through the lens of the gospel, that kind of thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So he's trying to look at in this book, first off, what is a good theology of technology and theology of how we approach using our smartphones and how we approach social media and those sorts of things. And in thinking through it theologically, thinking through it biblically, how should we approach the way that we're using it on a daily basis and the way that we interact with technology, and particularly our phones. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so tell me about maybe some of the particular insights that he gives. I'm assuming he has at least 12.
He has at least 12.
You don't have to go through them all, but tell us some of the things that he gives that you found particularly helpful.
Yeah. So really, he's not coming from the perspective of, technology is inherently bad. I think a lot of books and a lot of folks can approach, use of smartphones and those sorts of things as, well, they're inherently bad. So we should just stop using them. He's not coming at it from that angle. He's really trying to ask the question, what are we using it for? What's our purpose behind having a smartphone? What's our purpose behind having social media and these sorts of things? And so he points out, as you said, 12 ways that these technologies actually shape us and change us, that maybe we're aware of some, maybe we're not aware of some. Some of the key ones that I think are really pertinent is, I think he highlights that we're addicted to distraction on one hand. And so we kind of over time become a people that we don't like to be bored. We want to be distracted. We want to be entertained. We want to have kind of something in front of us. And a lot of that is somewhat chemical, right? Like our phones are shaped and created in such a way that they hit that kind of dopamine response that we have just as created beings, right? It's the same chemical that our bodies produce whenever people gamble, whenever we kind of hit something novel and new, and so our phones and social media, they're designed in such a way that they release these responses, these chemical responses in us, and that's an addictive chemical. And so he actually uses that word, that we become really addicted in a lot of ways to these things because of the chemical that gets released in the way that they're designed. We're also addicted to immediate approval. And one of the key things that I think he talks about in that section of the book is when we're face to face with somebody, there's really no way to kind of self-edit who we are very well.
Right.
But when we're behind a screen, it's very easy to self-edit, right? We can put up filters. We decide what picture someone sees, what video somebody sees. We get to, and really even I think about in this time right now that we're in, where a lot of our interaction is video chat, we get to kind of decide what we put in the background to kind of say, hey, look at kind of what I've got going on,
I noticed your impressive library there.
Do you see what's happening? Exactly. So, but a lot of that, right, is a sense of self-editing that we can kind of put forward, a particularly kind of version of ourselves through these means. And so we do that because when we put a certain version of ourselves forward, a lot of times we do that so that we can get approval, so that we can get the likes, the hearts, the whatever it is on whatever platform we want to talk about. And so, but that actually feeds that chemical response as well.
So does he give kind of recommendations or guidelines? Does he make it more kind of prescriptive and say, therefore we ought to do X, or is it more descriptive as far as what he's trying to do?
Yeah, he does a lot of describing for a good chunk of the book, and he's really trying to build the case for understand what's happening and why we're using our phones and social media the way that we are. That there are effects that we're not aware of, that we're not realizing, we're not thinking about. Essentially arguing, we lose pretty quickly the ability to read deeply, to think critically, to sit calmly, to be creative, to wander, and let our minds wander. We try to put up a barrier against boredom, right? Because boredom becomes this kind of enemy to us. We don't want to be bored people, but boredom is actually can be a good thing for us. So he lays a lot of groundwork describing the effects, but then he gets to questions that help us reflect on how we're using our phones and how we're using these various sorts of technology. Questions that help us kind of assess, the way that we're approaching, really the way that we're approaching the good of these things. And so a lot of his questions and his kind of rubric that he forms is a question about worship, right? It really comes down to, is the way that we use our phone and social media, et cetera, is it glorifying to the Lord? Is it for the building up of other people? Does it display, one of the questions he asks, does it display my freedom in Christ, or does it display my bondage to the device itself, right? Am I able to express love and encouragement and care and compassion for other people, for their good, for the glory of God, by kind of putting it through a filter, or am I able to do it really in all medium, right? Whether it's face-to-face, whether it's through a phone, whether it's, however I can communicate, that's my goal, right? Or am I really tied to, I have to use this device so that I can put this version of myself forward. And so he's really getting at kind of the heart behind our individual heart behind the way that we approach it, right? And I think we often approach using a phone, using social media very passively. We kind of, we just kind of take in whatever is given to us, whatever's thrown at us. And this is really kind of the key behind social media, right? Like we're not consumers of social media so much as we're kind of the product that social media companies sell, if you will. Like we're getting stuff out of them, but really they're getting more than we are to be able to sell and use that information and all that kind of stuff. And that's a whole other conversation for sure.
Like a whiteboard out, like a chart and everything with like lines.
And some of the things that, one of the key ideas, and he doesn't use this word comes from another author on the same topic, but it's the idea of abstraction. And so our use of social media and our cell phones as a primary way of communicating with people, one thing it actually does is it actually kind of makes people separated from one another.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can kind of get behind a screen and you can kind of be behind a screen, right? And I don't actually have to see you or interact with you face to face or know you personally, then you actually become this kind of abstract idea to me.
Yeah.
And that's how you are to me. I can say and do whatever I want to do, right? Because you're not a fully formed person now in my mind. You're an abstract idea.
Yeah.
And that's one of the effects of social media can have. And so he really approaches this saying that, the Christian faith, we understand the value of embodiment, right? Of physical presence. This goes back to even what Bonhoeffer writes about, of the physical presence of being with one another. And that helps break down that sense of abstraction, because if I can see you, if I can actually be with you, then I know you as a person and I can care about who you are, right? And that kind of breaks down some of those things that
I'm accountable to you, and I've got to deal with you, right? I've got to bear with, I've got to forgive, I've got to encourage, like in a real substantive sense.
Yeah. And that gets to one of his main questions, right? Of like, is the way that I use this actually building you up and serving you for good? and for the glory of the Lord? Or is it meant for my own self-gratification and self-glory?
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Can you draw, and it's okay if not, but can you draw a line between this book and reading it and just maybe thinking about this topic while you're reading it to any particular practices you have when it comes to technology and your phone or tablets or stuff like that? Like, do you have any rhythms that or habits that you try to hold on to?
Yeah, I think some key things are, right. Again, technology is not inherently bad. I think it's the question of when do we use it and why do we use it. And so I think rather than allowing technology and a lot, particularly social media, right? That's kind of the main, when we think about our smartphones, like that's kind of the main thing that we're really kind of getting at in a lot of ways. And I think allowing it to have its place and not allowing it to permeate the whole day, right? So I think one of the key practices there that's helpful is take your Facebook and your Twitter and your Instagram, take it off your phone and just use it when you're on your actual computer, right? And set aside the time. Like give yourself a time limit each day. I'm gonna spend no more than whatever time, 30 minutes a day on social media, and then outside of that, I'm not gonna access it. It's not gonna be in my pocket because it's not on my phone. I have to actually go to my computer, grab
some effort. It's a little inconvenient.
Yeah, and I think that too, that helps you. Right. One of the first things that so many of us do when we wake up, right, is we grab our phones, right? And so when it's not on the phone, it's not the first thing that we jump into. Like I don't immediately jump into my Facebook account, my Instagram, right? Whenever I first wake up. And so I think that helps create some of those barriers. And I think it's the key of creating just intentionality behind it, right? Like if I'm going to go to these apps, these sites, whatever, I want to do it for an intentional reason, rather than just being kind of passive and I'm trying to kill time. So I think those are some helpful tips, right? Just limit the time, limit the access, and give it its space, but be more rigid about when it's allowed to have the space in our day.
That's really good. Excellent. Really helpful, man. Well, I appreciate you sharing about this book, and I hope that many of our IDC folks will take a look at it. I think even just as we're talking, I'm sitting here like rehashing all of my kind of technology use practices, and feel like I need to revisit and reevaluate. So super helpful. Well, thanks for the encouragement, man. Thanks for teaching us and passing that along for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for the time, man.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Yeah, see you, Jane.